Hello, you beautiful people. So, I want to clarify something that I said in my 3 tips to win your fantasy league video about trading for competitive players. This has been taken way too far by a lot of people, and this is somewhat my fault because I definitely wasn't clear enough, and I'm seeing a lot of people panic and try to trade their top players due to the potential of resting games. So, I'm making this video because I'm hoping it helps make things more clear and explains why you shouldn't always undersell your best players. So, before we begin, feel free to like and subscribe if you want to. We just hit 500 subs, so shout out to you guys, really appreciate the love. And also, I have a Discord for people who really love basketball, so that link's going to be in the description. It's really great if you want to talk about anything NBA, fantasy, or hoop related. And yeah, with that being said, let's just start the video. So the first point I want to make is that most fantasy playoffs end at week 19 of the NBA season at the absolute latest, as they should. Like, you shouldn't go any later than that. So you should definitely look at your playoff settings because they're usually scheduled differently depending on the amount of teams in your league and how many of them make it to the playoffs. You don't want to be playing fantasy going into that final week because then everyone rests games and it's all waiver wire players getting 40 minutes a game. Now, if your playoffs are week 17, 18, and 19, hardly anyone is going to be resting games until maybe week 19, and that's only if the standings are like definitive. At this point in the season, no one has any definitive spots in the standings, and it's looking really competitive this year. There's not really that many games separating seeds 1 through 10 in both conferences. And if this continues, then players are going to keep playing games. Like, my point in the last video was more meant for people who already had the best team in their league, and their playoffs loomed into week 19 and 20 of the NBA season. And that kind of brings me to my next point, and that's that there's no guarantee that you're even going to make the finals. If you undersell on guys like Embiid, Towns, LeBron, and Kawhi, then that might be the breaking point for your team that costs you a trip to the finals. When I made that previous video, I definitely should have been clear about how trading for these competitive players is really only if you're like the number 1 seed in your league and very confident that you'll make the finals. If your team is in the middle of the pack, then you might need to make some trades for some of the previously mentioned players so that you can even make it to the finals. Some people actually aren't even qualified for their playoffs and they want to trade for competitive players, and I find that even the term competitive players has lost meaning if the standings are this closely contested. And the fantasy playoffs don't even happen in the last week when everyone does typically rest. So yeah, resting games has become a bit overrated. I was even guilty of it before, but hey, now we can all learn and get better from it. I mean, it's all about learning. Each season you're going to get better at fantasy, just practice the repetition. You're going to learn more how it works. So definitely a great lesson to take from this season. And yeah, it's just don't get tunnel vision on the finals week because there are still so many steps to get there first. You never know if there's going to be some health and safety protocols. Maybe one of your players is going to get injured. And yeah, I think that people are just kind of taking for granted that they're going to make the finals, but you gotta be honest, like, nobody actually knows for sure if their team's going to make it. Like, anything could happen, really. And yeah, you shouldn't really trade your star players on the potential that someone is going to, like, maybe miss 1 game or 2 games maximum through weeks 17 to 19. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with holding on to someone like Towns or Embiid, and I definitely wouldn't recommend underselling on these top 10 fantasy points performers anymore. I was wrong when I said that before. I should have been clear. This is like, if your playoffs go into week 20 for some reason, then by all means you go ahead and undersell if you really need a competitive player. But if your fantasy league is ending before then I just go ahead and hold on to these guys because the odds of them missing games is very slim. And yeah, nobody actually knows if they're going to be missing any, so I wouldn't recommend underselling these top 10 fantasy points performers unless you can get the right price for them. And this kind of brings into a side point that I want to make in this video. And as much as I love people giving everyone advice, we got to remember that we're just people and we don't really have any connections to these NBA teams. So this goes with asking when people will be back from injury too. I get a lot of comments and some people in my Discord asking when players are going to be back from injury, and nobody knows any better than you do from our perspectives. Like, all we can do is read the reports and say what they're saying, but we all know they're not entirely accurate all the time. And yeah, none of us actually know definitively whether someone's going to rest games or when players are going to return from injury. And so, for example, just be cautious, whether it's in the Discord or in the comments anywhere, when you're asking about like whether players are going to be back in time for a certain week or if they're going to rest games, because while I really appreciate guys giving advice, I love to give advice to you guys as well. Just be aware it might not be very accurate because none of us truly know these things. So yeah, just wanted to make sure y'all knew there's nothing wrong with having these players like Braun, Kawhi, Towns, etc. because they're the ones that are going to help you get to the finals, and nobody actually knows if they're going to rest in the weeks before the final week of the season. If your playoffs is set to have the finals in week 20, which it shouldn't be, you might be able to change it. Depends if you're in ESPN or Yahoo leagues, but in general, don't freak out and trade these players because of a potential factor that probably won't even come into effect. I was guilty of telling you guys to do this before. I want to take it back. I'm really sorry. I mean, if you did undersell these players, it's not the end of the world. Like, you probably got a decent haul for them in return just based off of their name alone. But yeah, hopefully this clears up some confusion and helps you guys really construct your rosters well. And with that being said, I want to thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you all have a great day, and yeah, enjoy the All-Star game tonight. Leave a comment down below who you think's going to win the 3-point and the dunk contest.